This congregation joins with other UUs in the tradition of striking the gong 3 times, once in memory for those who have gone before, once in honor of those here today, and once for the future. Sean. Thank you, Sean. Good morning. Welcome and happy Easter. Hopefully the rain will hold off for a couple of hours. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation, the church that puts its faith in you. It's a place where you can be by yourself, but not by yourself. You can be yourself and not by yourself. It's all those words. It's been a long night. Thank you. Whomever you love, whomever you are, however you describe the holy, you are welcome here. I'm Martha Sinkula, and I'm your service leader today. We are so very glad that you are here. I especially welcome those of you who might be watching from home, and also those of you who are visiting for the first time. Please stay after service. Today we have a soup luncheon and downstairs in our social hall. So please take time to come down and get to know us, and so we can get to know you.
Martha, you want to remind them that both the stairs and ramp will get you down to the lunch.
I've been reminded by His Honor. We do have a lovely ramp that John built for us, and you go out this ramp door, this door to my right, and you go down and around, and the door will be open downstairs. If you have a cell phone, could you kindly turn it off? I want to thank our greeters. We have had Gemma and Dana and Annan helping us today. Jake manning the computers in the back, streaming us out, and Sean helping us with this wonderful music. And Jen in the office for putting this service together. Again, thank you, everyone who are with us today, and for caring to keep this very important place vital. We also acknowledge the people who came before us on this land called the Umpqua, for the river that flows through it, and whose name graces our congregation. Here for thousands of years, loving this land and living in harmony, the Umpqua are still giving us gifts of action and wisdom. We make this land acknowledgement in recognition of the Umpqua and in the beginning of an atonement for harms done, part of the path towards healing. Today we are delighted to again have Reverend Dennis Reynolds, the voice from the back of me, serving our congregation as an interim developmental minister. His office hours continue to be Tuesdays from 1 to 4. And I'm sure, as many of you know, he brings an extensive ministerial background and humor and insight he's eager to meet and work with all of us, and focuses now on helping current committees and administration to help our congregation grow and thrive. We are grateful for his guidance and opportunity. If you have an order of service, please take a look at the events that are coming up. I had one that had an insert, but mine that's up here does not have one, but look at your insert. It has several things in it of events that are happening. One of the things that I didn't see, oh, thank you, Sean. We have the new member ceremony today. We have welcoming groups, which starts on April 11th, which is Tuesday at 5. There's a song circle tonight from 6 to 8. Positive open mic on the 12th, 6:30 to 8. That's our own Sean and his wife, Susie, run that, and it's a wonderful opportunity. The other thing that's happening, and I don't see it, Jake, you're presenting your movie? And is it Saturday night? This Saturday night? What time?
Yep, it's the 15th and 16th.
The 15th and the 16th. Our media director, Jake, makes films in his spare times. He owns Spider King Studios. And the film that he completed a little bit ago called Death with Dignity, Joe and I saw it. It's quite moving. And he's going to be showing it Saturday night and Sunday at 1 for a donation. So if you're interested, please come. It's here in our service, in our hall, right here. So we'll get that. It'll be in our announcements, I'm sure, this week. Thank you. Okay. I think it's time to collect for fish. Do I have a couple of little people that might want to help? Do I have any volunteers to come up? I've got baskets. I got one over there. Jody, are we having anybody come up from your family? Nope. Okay, Annan, you're on. Will you do a pitch? Will you do a pitch for this during the... Excuse me. Go ahead.
We begin the deepening into worship with the lighting of the chalice, the words from Kathy Huff.
Spirit of life, be present with us this hour.
Join us today as we gather in a wider search for truth and meaning.
In this quest, may we greet one another with open hearts and minds.
May we inspire one another to consider new questions and seek deep answers.
May we cultivate wisdom and compassion.
Let all who enter this sanctuary see welcoming faces.
Hear kind words and comfort in community.
And may all that is done and said here today be in the service of justice and love. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn. For those who want the music, it's number 44 in your hymnal. It will be projected as well. We sing of golden mornings. The lyrics of this hymn are from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who, along with others called the Transcendentalists in the mid-19th century, transformed and changed a faith called Unitarianism to make it somewhat similar to what we've become in our time. We sing of golden mornings.
We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, of stately forest trees. We sing of
Thank you. Please be seated. And I have a story to share with the young and the young of heart, and anyone who wants to see illustrations a little closer. You're invited to come forward, either sitting down here in front of me, or there's some chairs in the front row. But if you want to stay right where you are, that's okay too. Now, some of the adults in this room, I always forget to move this thing out of the way. I don't need to look that tall. In 19th century Unitarianism, I would have had the opportunity to climb a little ladder up here, to be in a raised pulpit, to be elevated amongst you. That's not the way we function in contemporary Unitarian Universalism. They bring ministers down a little closer to the congregation. And I'm glad we do, or I don't think I ever would have become one in those days. By the way, just a little preview of some history I'm going to bring up next month. Ralph Waldo Emerson found being elevated difficult too. We claim him proudly as one of our ministers. He left after about 2.5 years in the pulpit with a conflict with his congregation. But more about that. That's a preview of next month's service. Today, I want to share a story that many of the adults may remember. It's called The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. And as you can see, the copy that lived at my house is kind of worn and tattered. It's been around for a while. The Little House. How many people remember it from your own childhood? We've got a smattering. For the rest of you, if you don't remember it, it's for you here today. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty house, and she was strong and very well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren." Living in her. Actually, they said great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren. So even more history they were predicting. The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning. She watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from the one before. But the little house stayed just the same. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars way off in the distance. She could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live there. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green, she watched the buds on the trees swell, and the apple trees burst with blossoms. She watched the children playing in the brook. In the summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves, and the white daisies cover the hills. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children playing in the pond. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvests gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. What's next, do you think? In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year. The apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city. And now at night, the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the road. Pretty soon there were more of them. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Sticky pages in this old book. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster than before. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed there and watched. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house. It didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed the same. Pretty soon they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other. Pretty soon they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. You can barely see in the middle of the illustration. The little house is still there. Little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all because the lights were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night she used to dream of the country and the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Then, one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies with apple trees growing around." Well, they discovered that that was the very same house. So they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. And they said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house, put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. At first, the little house was frightened to be moved, but she got used to it, and she rather liked it. They rolled along the roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They tried the little house one place, and they tried her there. Finally, they saw a little hill in the midst of a field and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again she could watch the sun and the moon and stars. Once again she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come again. The house was renewed. Okay, now we're going to sing our kids down for their morning program. Please rise in body or in spirit. Or let's just remain seated so we've got more room for kids to get out. It'll be projected here, or the words are in your order of service. Use the words that speak to your inner voice. We've got the circle of life, and then I'm going to put.
I'm going to try this without the box.
We can slide it over.
Now's the time in our service where we remember those joys and concerns in our lives. I would like you, if you have a candle that you'd like to light or a silent candle that you'd like to honor, to form a line over here to my right. And for those of you who have a spoken candle, please give your name and try to be brief. Thank you.
the opportunity to serve a small congregation like this is observing how present you are for each other. I get copied on emails when they're hunting out, has anybody heard from so-and-so? Some of them are names I don't know because I showed up here recently. And some of them I did. I also work with committees, and I've had the honor to work with a membership committee who has, over the past few months, crafted a new status of membership for members of this congregation called honored members. Honored members are primarily folks who have been around here for a long time, who are granted continuing membership without concerns over whether they're going to commit time now or in the future, or whether or not they're going to make a financial pledge, because these folks have paid their dues, right? And I was very touched this morning because one of those names who got a letter in the last week or two and hopefully had the opportunity to receive it was Marianne Wilcox. Other folks who have been granted that status: Judy Robertson, Gail Spitzer, David Grant, Laurie August Cayley, and Joyce Swanson. The status is established to let those folks know and remind all of us that whether or not they're with us here in body, they are here with us in spirit. And that the love they shared with this congregation, with this covenanted, beloved community, continues. The membership committee will be looking at other names over time, but the creation of the status is that kind of bureaucratic work we do in church that gives voice to the intentions of our heart and soul. So I wanted to let you know about that part of the circle of life, of a congregation's life. Also today, we're going to look at another part of the circle of a congregation's life, and that's the welcoming of new members. We have 3 folks we're going to welcome specifically this morning. A couple of them are going to actually sign the book, because that's one of the other things we've done in conversation with membership committee, is we hope that looking forward, the signing of the official membership book will not be done quietly in the office. We're going to invite people to come down and honor them as they sign the book. So we've got 3 people this morning. 2 have signed the book already. One has signed the book already, and 2 are going to sign it today. So I'm going to ask Kathy Baker, come on down. You've signed the book. And just stand over here in the middle so that the people online coming in from video, maybe your folks will see you when they look at the recorded sermon, right? Kathy is known to many of you as Al and Mary's kid. You know, their little girl, right? So, and she's, as she settles into a new career here in Roseburg, has pledged that she's going to, as time allows, become more involved. So you'll see her more around here. The other are Sharon Barlow Palm and Charles Palm. Coming up, please. Now, Sharon and Charles moved here from Boise, but Sharon, many of you knew before she ever went to Boise. There in Boise at UU Church, she ran into this guy named Charles. And they come back together as a couple, and they've chosen to become part of this beloved community. And I need, wait a minute. No? I got it. I'll try to remember to put it back in the basket in case you want to do a check for your pledge this morning. This is the official membership book of the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Church, which the label you were using at the time the book was printed. And signing this book is what makes one actually officially a member. The last signature in here in December was Kathleen Baker, who's here. I'm going to ask the Palms to sign, And then to later, we'll get them to fill out name and address and those kinds of details while you folks are here to witness the signature. And then we're going to share some words for all three of these folks. Sign on the not dotted line.
Remind everybody, this is the second time I've signed this.
I know, well, that's part of the piece too. As Sharon reminded me to remind you, she was a member, then went to Boise, and so this is a renewal of membership, which you may notice the title of the sermon is going to be about renewal, so we felt like this particularly would fit. And I'm going to go ahead and start the words while she passes the book on to Charles. And there is an insert in the order of service, and Charles brought one. I'm going to give Kathy this one, because I've got it up here on my pad in my script. We welcome today into membership in the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Church a group of friends who desire to unite with us in religious fellowship. And then you and I, please join me. We welcome you into our congregation, where you shall be free to search and find an ever more vital faith and encouraged to live it. We welcome your enthusiasm and pledge ourselves to the larger life of fellowship, strengthened by your participation. Now, you guys can do addresses later because it's your part. Charles and Kathy, we need you. We'll wait till he's through signing. We're going to make this official. He'll be a new member as soon as he puts that pen down. Right? You ready? Okay. Now, new members, this is your part.
We join.
Go ahead.
Okay. We join this church seeking not an escape from duty, nor refuge from the
struggles
of this
of the
world, but to add our portion, great or small, to this church community and for the common riches of humanity.
Now it's going to be all of us, including the new members. From many backgrounds and with different experiences, we have all come here, and we have found that the religious fellowship which our hearts have sought, we would join together in the common union of love and the common quest for the highest. And this is a responsive reading I'm going to share with you folks, and we're going to make sure the button gets pushed so that the mic's on. Is that? Yeah, it's got the light.
The light should be on already.
The light's on. Think ice cream cone. Think carrot rather than ice cream cone, and you'll be heard better. It's one of those little microphone tips from the day.
Carrots for Easter.
I'm going to read the regular type, and we ask you to respond with the bold type. By joining this church, you have committed yourself not to any fixed intellectual creed or any stated body of doctrine, but to a moral and spiritual purpose.
We must seek the truth for ourselves in the undimmed light of conscience, and wherever we find it, faithfully follow it.
Worship your God as you find God in your own experience, as you articulate the holy, the power of your growing thought, the voice of conscience, the revelation of beauty, and in all that fills the open heart.
We'll serve humanity wherever justice beckons us, or mercy calls, in simple task or great. And on all these things, deal honestly with the best of our thought, never pretend the false is the true, or the wrong the right.
In the present tragic world, where so much remains to be done to establish justice and build human community and the bonds of sympathy and love, it is fitting that those who are ready to consecrate themselves to this task should bind themselves together in a covenanted community and be dedicated to its sacred purpose.
Our purpose does not end with this or any individual church. It goes out to the ends of the earth, and so far as thought can reach. We will be joining not only the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Church, but the Church of the Free Mind everywhere. We must never be shut in by any narrower claim. We belong to a faith that sets no bounds and knows no fetters to personhood, unlimited to the Church Universal.
It's official. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm going to consecrate it with a good high five. All right. All right. Hang on to that till you get time to fill in the addresses and stuff, Charles.
We have one last thing to do. Yes, you may.
So Sharon shared with me yesterday that when my parents lived in Homedale, Idaho, they went to the Boise church, and that's where she met them. And I just thought that was so cool.
Absolutely. May the circles be unbroken. Amen.
I'm going to take the candle wherever the box might have gone, and I'm going to light one. And while I do that, please rise in body or spirit, and we'll sing Spirit of Life. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and from hard work. We are so grateful for this, and we commit together to ensure the funds that we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than we could have done by our just alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation, and may we give in love and in hope. And if you have one of these pledging cards for the year, you may drop that in the basket or put it in the pledge box when you get up to leave. Thank you. For the gifts that we have received, May we be truly grateful, and may we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world and to expand our beloved community. Thank you very much.
Now, our responsive reading this morning, we're going to do what's called antiphonally, and that means we're going to read it to each other. And it's from the hymnal, and we're not going to read as much as the order of service said we were going to in the interest of time. One of the beauties of serving small congregations that doesn't happen in big churches is what we just experienced, all that joys and sorrows that come with the circle of life. And you folks know that time is an important part of coming together in worship, and you hang on to that. Big churches, you write it down in a little book and maybe light a candle, but it doesn't have the same echo within the beloved community. So we're going to do a little less than we originally planned for. We're going to read. Oh, we've got a meditation anthem first, but you know what I'm going to
Do this
do?
now.
Let's do the reading, then we'll do some silence, followed by some music, before I talk some more. I haven't achieved perfection yet, so, maybe if I get enough lifetimes, I'll have that opportunity. Now, what I want you to do is to look beyond the preface at the front of a hymnal, take up a gray hymnal, and beyond the preface, in what would be about page 10, but it doesn't have a page number on it, you'll find a page that looks like this. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Okay, so take a minute and find that place in the front. And what we're going to do is we're going to read the principles. We're going to talk next month more about the traditions we draw from and the many sources. So what I want to do is invite this side of the room to read that first principle with me. That side of the room will read the second principle with Martha, who I'm going to hand this portable mic to because I've got this one. And down through all 7 of the principles of this, our faith. And I want to emphasize the importance of the preface and to acknowledge what this is. If you look at the really small type on the adjoining page, it says adopted as a bylaw by the 1984 and 1985 General Assembly. And in the newer edition of the hymnal that I have at home, it says, and 1995 as well. It's a bylaw. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, preface, I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to ask you to join me in the first principle. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
A free and responsible search of truth and meaning.
The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Bent web of all existence of which we are a part. So I invite you to close the books, settle in to a contemplative, quiet state. Sit in a way that allows your breath to flow most fully. For most of us, that means legs uncrossed. But sit in a way that's comfortable for you as we share a brief time of meditation, and then we'll be gifted by some song of it. And I want to do it in the form that we've done here before, and some of you may recall a movement meditation. That says a lot about who we strive to be as communities and individuals. And I invite you to begin with your hands open. Open to receive whatever may come. Open to joy, open to sorrow, open to difficulties, open to the beauty of a spring morning. Just open. And whatever comes to you, inhale and bring it to your heart and hold on to it as though your life depends upon it for just a moment. And then to exhale and let it go so that your hands may be open and empty to receive again. So that's hands open, breathe in and hold, exhale and let go. Open, in and hold it, and then let it go. Open, in, hold, and let go. Let's just hold hands open for a brief time.
Sun's eyes are painting fields again, disguised eyelashes sweep the land, embraced by sunlight's masquerade. The earth's a canvas on parade. Just a little clay and water in a bowl, reveal these wonders to behold. What new delights will soon unfold. The endless petals of the soul. One heart resides in everything. Renew your body, hear it sing. Each act and creature we perceive has roots in one who can conceive. Just a little clay and water in a bowl, reveal these wonders to behold. What new delights will soon unfold. The endless petals of the soul. 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 sun's eyes are painting fields again. Disguised eyelashes sweep the land. Illuminated scents and sounds. Exquisite whirling forms abound. Just a little clay and water in a bowl. Reveal these wonders to behold. What new delights will soon unfold. The endless petals of the soul. 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 Sun's eyes are painting fields again.
Thank you, Sean. Some Sundays I feel like, I'm that name rock band that follows the rockin' opening act. And as I get into the sermon, you'll find there's sometimes some synchronicity of the songs that Sean selects, even though he didn't know all the words I planned to share. I want to begin this morning by saying, in spite of the image Sean painted for us and the description we heard about yesterday's dawn, most of this week the weather has not been particularly what we might call spring-like. Monday morning, when I first sat down to begin to work on this sermon, I looked out the window of my office to a dusting of snow. Springtime? Really? Certainly didn't look like spring, but years of experiencing this time of year and weather data and the fact that it said April on the calendar led me to believe that as a man of faith, I can hold on to the truth that spring has arrived, or is at least arriving. Now, as the week progressed, it was really lovely yesterday, and even midweek, I think it feels like the rain's beginning to get a little warmer out there. This year, I really needed spring even more than I do at the end of a typical gray Oregon winter. This spring is a special spring because it seems like we're finally emerging, renewing, rebirthing, if you will, from a pandemic. For the reality is these past 3 years, we have been walking in the shadow of the valley of death. And it's been a lot of evil. And we seem to be coming out of that. And that reemergence, that rebirth, that renewal, that resurrection, if you will, feels pretty darn good. And I found myself having, again and again, a deep collective sigh. Join me. Just a sigh together, big sigh. It's not over. But thanks to vaccination and good treatment regimens, the real shadow of scary risk of death is dramatically reduced. So it's getting better out there. It's spring. And this is a season of renewal in so many ways. Outside, the trees that looked as though they had died are blooming in a myriad of pastel hues. Now, the bold pink blossoms that are beginning to unfold in my front yard from those peach trees are a particular favorite. And I think that's in part because I'm counting on each one of them having the potential to become a peach. I know they won't all make it, but I'm hoping. And the greens, the kinds of screens I saw on the meadows driving down here, are so bright they nearly glow. The bulbs and tubers that waited silently in their winter tombs are rising and showing off yellow and gold and blue and hot pink. I give gratitude to the Oregon Department of Transportation or whoever it was that planted so many daffodils along I-5. What an annual gift to all of us when we travel. Spring is the season of renewal. For our Jewish kith and kin, it's the Passover season wherein they celebrate each year their historic deliverance from the shadow of death that passed over their ancestors. I know I'm filled with deep gratitude that thanks to those vaccinations and treatments, the shadow of deathly COVID has mostly passed over for us. For our Christian neighbors and the Christians amongst us, this past week has been Holy Week, a time set aside to recall and reflect on the stories of that great teacher Jesus' last days, his crucifixion and proclaimed resurrection. Though many of us no longer affirm the literal truth of all those stories, they offer to us an expression of the great truth of Easter, the truth that you cannot kill love. You cannot kill love. That's, for me, the key message of Easter, because it will rise again. It will arise. It does not die. It arises again and again and again. Now, each spring offers us a time of renewal and rebirth. Yet each spring is different from the one that preceded it, and the one before that, and the one before that, and the one before that. And the spring next year will be different from this one, because renewal is an ongoing, unfolding process. It's true in all of our individual life. It's true for the greatest culture, and it's true for our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. For Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. Change is in our theological DNA. Our religion, as our reading reminded us, and we'll talk more about this, draws from many sources and lifts up profound values. Our diverse and religious and spiritual beliefs are tied together by a common thread of shared belief. Not a creed, mind you, a doctrine we're all asked to pledge allegiance to, but rather a covenant. A covenant. A covenant is the pledge we make to each other and to the continuing tradition that is our faith. We pledge ourselves not to a doctrine of belief, but to each other. Our covenantal core is made up of our connection and our connection to this faith. We'll be talking more later in the month about covenant and how it's actualized in what we do. On Saturday, the 29th of April, representatives from the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, will be hosting a workshop here about covenant. On Sunday the 30th, it will be topic of the Sunday service. Now, there'll be more about all of that in the UMQuest over the next few weeks. And by the way, those of you who did such an awesome job putting together lunch today, we're going to be asking you and some others to help us do a lunch that weekend as well. Ongoing service is the nature of a covenant beloved community. Now, covenant, for today's purposes, I'd like to lift up as primarily our connection to each other and to the faith. that we covenant to be part of, that larger movement of Unitarian Universalism and the collective corporate, though I have a hard time with that word sometimes, but it is true, corporate entity that is the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA. By the way, we as Unitarian Universalists are not a denomination like many other collections of churches, but rather an association of independent congregations. That means that no overarching edicts are passed down from Boston. At least nothing that they can count on that we will follow. They do offer lots of suggestions, mind you. The UUA is an association wherein we collectively operate through the consent of the governed. This morning, I want to introduce you to a new articulation of faith that many are proposing UUism might adopt. It is intended to be a statement of who we have been becoming and who we aspire to be in the 21st century. Now, this particular action now be considered as an amendment to the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Now, bylaws may seem a bit mundane to many and not of great theological or personal significance, but as I pointed out in our reading, the UUA, the bylaws, include our principles and sources. And we're in the midst of a season of renewal in Unitarian Universalism. This is not the first time the living tradition has changed. As noted earlier, Emerson and other transcendentalists like Henry David Thoreau and Margaret Fuller changed this faith in the mid-19th century. In the 20th century, we became more theologically diverse and deeply committed to a greater focus on faith in action, on what we do. And in 1961, the Unitarian and Universalist churches merged to become the Unitarian Universalists, the church with too long a name, right? Now, the portion of the bylaws that seeks to offer an articulation of our faith, as we noted, were adopted in the General Assembly in 84 and 85 and in 95. And there was a proposal to change them significantly back in 2009, though that particular proposal was voted down by a relatively narrow margin. Now, in 2023, new proposed amendments to Article 2 of our association bylaws are coming forward. Over the past few years, an appointed task force has done a deep dive into our foundational shared beliefs, and they have emerged at input with a proposed revision. I think it's pretty exciting, though it does ask us to let go of articulations of belief we have held close to our hearts. Rather than a cut and paste approach to revising that portion of the bylaws of Article 2, the task force started over. They have gifted us with a new vision of a new 21st century Unitarian Universalism. It is new, it's different, and I think it's pretty exciting. Rather than an articulation in words, they've offered us this. Jake, can we get the first slide, please? It's also on the cover of your order of service. This is what they offer us. It's the same image on the order of service. We wanted to make sure you had a copy so you could take it away with you and just ponder it a bit. For those of you online, it's in this week's Quest as well as being projected now. Now, I have to admit, when I first looked at it, I had a hard time with it. This is the bylaws? I mean, bylaws are supposed to look like bylaws. Or at least what bylaws have looked like in the past. I find, though, that the more I look at it and the more I contemplate deeply, the better I like it. In part because I remembered that bylaws as they have functioned in the past are part of a particular linear, verbal-centric way of exploring the world that functions best in the logic-centric left half of my brain. Half of my brain. When I view an image through more abstract and intuitive thinking becomes an option, my right brain can also engage. The same is true when I view art, like Gemma's art images adorning our walls. The greatest truths are sometimes revealed in media and methods other than in words. It's true in art, it's true in music, it's true in intentional silence, and it's true in nature. And it's true within our own being in that inner realm some call soul. The commission did also offer us some words in kind of bylaw format. Section C 2.2, Values and Covenant. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from the heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundations of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are. And then they give us this image as the expression of our shared values. And they also offer a description. This image is of a chalice with an overlay of the word love over the flame burning in our sacred cup. With 6 outstretched arms, they create a circle around the core values and form a 6-petal flower shape. There are those petals again, right? Thank you, Sean. Each arm is a different color, and clockwise they are interdependence, portrait circled in orange, equity in red, transformation in purple, pluralism in dark blue, generosity in teal, and justice in yellow. They then go on to describe the core values of our belief, the shared beliefs that bind us as one. Can we get that other slide now, Jake? The one with the words. You may or may not be able to see them from here, but okay, thank you, Sean. Hopefully that's a little better, but I am going to read them, and we will be sharing them more over weeks and months to follow. Maybe, depending on what happens in General Assembly this summer, we may be sharing them for years, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to just describe them to you. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Justice. We work to be a diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive, democratic processes to make decisions. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, and attention and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. That's the gift that we're being suggested we might choose to embrace as an expression of our values. I'm particularly fond of that label, values. Values speaks more deeply to me, to my inner sense of being, than do principles, which tend to dwell in that left brain more for me. But each of us have the opportunity to look at it in our own ways. They also offer us a revised version of sources, which we're going to look at more next month, but I just want to let you know what they're proposing. The first piece is they don't call them sources, they call them inspirations. And it reads section C 2.3, inspirations. As Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us to live into our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Grateful for the religious ancestors we inherit and the diversity when enriches our faith, we're called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. And that's it. In short, it's a concise, inclusive set of inspiration. Now, all of this is a lot to digest. Which is why I'm beginning to ponder to share with you next month a sermon that explores this more broadly. And I particularly want to look at how did we get to where we are now in the context of a bit of a summary of Unitarian and Universalist history from the 19th and 20th century and what's been going on in the 21st that got us to here and now. For today, I invite you all to open your hearts and minds to the possibility of change, to consider letting go of what we have held so dear so that our hearts and minds and souls can be open to explore a more inclusive articulation of faith. Jake, let's return back to the first slide, that image. I think it's worth some pondering, and I'm going to invite you to take that copy away in the order of service and ponder it further. And we'll be putting some links into the UMQuest this week about where you can get more information. Or if you're in a hurry, you can simply Google UUA Article 2. And there's more information there than perhaps you might want, or at least links to plenty of information. The board will begin looking at today's meetings at the process for identifying delegates to this year's General Assembly, where further action on this proposed new articulation of our love-centered faith will take place. I'd like to end this morning with words from the esteemed poet Maya Angelou, who advised us that in the flash of love's light, we dare to be brave. And suddenly we see that love cost us all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. Only love which sets us free. May it forever be so. Amen and blessed be. I'm looking at that clock back there, and it's getting to be time for the lunch down there. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a suggestion that we maybe just do a quick
Yep.
Go to the benediction and then the ending hymn.
Yep. And that's what I'm getting to is unless there's just something you can't hold on and not say right now, let's keep to a very brief conversation. But I also recognize we are Unitarian Universalists, and sometimes there are things that are moving that we want to share here and now, and that's appropriate and okay. But let's keep it kind of concise.
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I'll say that. And I really want to study it, and I was a part of the group last time that reviewed the principles. But the one thing about the symbol, I'm not crazy about the swirlies. I wish it was on a rainbow flag, with the things. It's going to be much easier to tattoo on my leg.
Hey, man, I know I am actually pondering that same possibility, and I'm glad I'm not the only one. Maybe we'll go together, Sharon, and get the tattoos if it passes, but mine's probably going to be on my arm. No, I hear you. I got a crow here. We'll talk tattoos some future sermon, right?
Mine's real brief, too. For those of you who know me, I've always gone around saying I'm unchurched and that what I live are the values that I was raised with that were a part of my Jewish culture, but not the religion, not meaning anything negative. So when I heard the word values and I really started looking into this, I said, I'm home. That's how I've lived my life.
As a slight alternative to your virtues, in antiquities, wisdom was considered the first, justice the second, then comes temperance and fortitude, the four great virtues.
Right. I will just remind us, we are one of over 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations in America, but there are opportunities for input, indeed.
Real quick.
And what I appreciate again is they affirm never complete and never perfect. I like that part.
One thing I wanted to mention, behind that screen, and after we finish and Jake puts the screen up, the hanging that's behind the screen shows all of our inspirations, all the symbols. So you might want to take a look. It was lovingly made by a congregant several years ago.
And there are those that are hard to articulate visually because they exist as a light within. And that's part of what I appreciate as well in their abbreviated version. But like I said, I have some additional opportunities to share, and we'll be tighter. We won't be doing as many other things in that service, so we'll have time for more congregational conversation. We'll build that in next time as we move forward. So today, rather than sing the closing hymn, I'm going to invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our closing words of benediction, and then we'll sing as this congregation does each Sunday, Go Lifted Up, to end our service. And then that will be followed by additional time and community. So Jake, we're skipping Go Lifted Up. You got that? We're going to Go Lifted Up. I just want to share the title of the closing hymn we thought we might do. And that's Break Not the Circle. And that's what it's all about. Break not the circle, dear friends. Our words of benediction, that Martha's getting her copy.
But I can find it.
Well, you can look online. It's from the 20th century Unitarian and later Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams. A living tradition is not bequeathed through some love of inheritance.
It must be earned,
Not without dust and heat.
and not without humble grace.
Shalom, salam, amen, and blessed be. I'll extinguish and then we'll see. Now rise in body or in spirit as we sing Go Lifted Up. And remember, the easiest access to downstairs is through this door when you head down for lunch and on around the ramp. And you don't have to worry about the steep stairs, okay? Go in peace, go in love.